the reading that we ended up having with her dad was very emotional. They were very close. They were very connected. And we were sitting there, and the whole time we were sitting there was a penguin. A big penguin, like big, wah, 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 and it's walking around, and it's waggling its arms, and buck, 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 and it's squawking at this girl who's across the table from me the whole time. And it was very difficult to give this reading because it was so emotional. She was so close to her father, and he died relatively young, and she was only in her early 30s.
You randomly just bring up, there's a penguin.
And I'm like,
hi everyone, I'm Em.
And I'm Liv.
And we're your Meta Psyckicks.
Today we have a very special guest. We talk about my mom so much, Em's like, just bring her on the show. So here she is. You're welcome.
here I am. Hi.
She's gonna share a story of from when she used to be a real estate agent and showing old houses and the energy that can be associated with where people used to live.
I went to show a house as a real estate agent at that time with my husband at that time. We went to this house. This house was built in 1835. The whole thing was stone. The outside of the house, the inside of the house, super cool house. Big, huge hearth fireplace with a big metal swing arm to cook pots and things. When I go into a house in those days, I would go directly to the basement, because if the basement wasn't sound, especially in a house that's old, or the foundation had issues, I would not even bother bringing my client. This client was coming in from out of town, so I would preview the house, like Olivia said. So I went to this house, and my husband at the time came with me. He went right down to the basement, which is normally what I would do as well, because if the basement's crappy, I'm not even gonna waste my time. But I went into the house. I was just drawn into this house. This house, like I said, all the walls were stone, big, flat, round stone. They were beautiful. There was this set of windows in the corner that the corner of the house was just windows. It was beautiful, and it looked out over these birch trees with their white birch trunks, and there was a babbling creek and the yellow leaves. It was so beautiful. And I just knew that the man who had passed away was there. And he was at this house. It was like his life's breath. He didn't want to leave. He loved this house, and I could see why. It was absolutely beautiful. It was out in the woods. It was just so breathtaking. And I was stuck in this living room, and I started seeing images in my head of the footprints of a baby. Like when you go to the hospital and they take them and they ink their feet, and I could see them, except they were backwards. So instead of being big toe to big toe, they were pinky toe to pinky toe. And they were gray. They weren't black like the ink prints at the hospital. And I could feel that the surface was cold. You know, paper is warm, stone is cold, and the surface that these footprints were on were cold, and it was making me crazy. And I felt like I had to find them, and this man was coming in, and I fell in love with this house. I could feel how he loved this house. I could feel that this was his home, and it was cozy and inviting, even though it was stone and it was stark and the floor was stone.
He was so excited to show you his house.
Well, and there's more to that, but it was that as well, but there was more to it. It's almost like he was handpicked all of a sudden to help me understand all of this stuff that had been going on for decades of my life about seeing things, feeling things, knowing things. And this guy was kind of like the, I don't know.
He was the like tipping point.
Yeah. And these footprints just kept boom, boom. He just kept shoving them right in my foreface of my head and my brain. And
because my mom's a mental medium like me, we've talked about it a little bit, so we get images and thoughts and things
very
like
strong,
that.
Yeah. And I'm upstairs like, where are these footprints? And then I started seeing hash marks like on a doorway, and it was of children. You know how you measure your kids every year, every week, every month? And I saw these names and I saw these marks on this doorway, but I didn't know where that door was. I didn't know where the footprints were. And he was just giving me so much information, I couldn't keep up with it. And then all of a sudden, there's my husband standing there in the hallway, in the kitchen kind of, and he's like, Julianne. I'm like, and he just looked at me and goes, what's going on? I'm like, there's a guy here. And I just started sobbing. I'm like, he won't go away. He won't leave me alone. I don't know why he's showing me all these things, but he tells me that if I don't listen, I mean, he was almost kind of threatening to me. Then he started showing me when my mom died. And I was with my mom the day she died, and it was just me and her. And there are things that happened, and there's things that I did, nothing bad, but I never spoke about it to anybody. I never told anybody some of the things that I had to do the day that she died. And she was terminally ill, and so I had to let her go. And things that I said to her, just very private things that I did, and no one knew about it, but this dead guy did, and he showed them to me. He didn't just tell me, he showed me what I did and the sequence of steps that it took for me to get to that point with her while she was dying, and then right after she died, and even about a half an hour after she passed, before hospice was able to get there and any family was able to get there. It was just me and her.
So what, he was trying to like relate what was happening to him with your experience?
Well, I think he was trying to prove to me that this wasn't going to go away.
Ah.
You know what I mean? Because I told him, I'm like, leave me alone. Not only did I say it out loud, but I said it in my mind to him, and then I realized I'm talking to him in my mind, and he's like, no, I'm not going to leave it alone, and no, this is not going to go away, and no, this is not going to stop. This is who you are. And it was that's the day that my door just boom, just got my door kicked open, flat out, and he was not going to back off, and there was nothing that I could do. And so my husband came up and he's like, Julianne, I just like, what? And I turned around, I started crying, and he's like, what's the matter? I said, the man who lived in this house is here. He loves this house and he is not leaving. This is his, it's his everything. I mean, he just was here for so long, and it's who he is. And he goes, what? And I'm like, I said, it's his favorite pile of rocks. He's like, don't you love my favorite? It's my favorite pile of rocks. He's like, what are you seeing? I said, there's footprints. I said, I can't leave this room, and this fireplace is so cool. It was huge. It was probably 6 foot long by 5 foot tall. It was massive. And I told my husband, I said, do me a favor. And he's like, well, what can I do? I said, go down that hallway, go through the kitchen right there, and make a left. He's like, okay. So I'm still standing in the living room. I said, go around that corner. I said, take a left. He's like, okay. I said, there's a small hallway. He's like, yeah. And I said, and there's a bathroom immediately on the left. And he's like, yeah. And I said, and there's a toilet and then a sink and then the bathtub. He's like, yeah. I said, who the hell puts this sink next to the toilet, to the bathtub, right? Am I crazy? It's usually sink, toilet, bathtub.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so I'm not using my mind. Right. Well, this was messed up. It was toilet, then the sink, then the shower. And in the bathroom was a latch hook rug of a sunflower, and I described that. I described the tile, the color. I said, now go back out and go into that bedroom at the end of the hallway. And he's like, okay, which was also on the left. And he's like, yeah, I described the bedroom in full detail. A queen size bed with an old like handmade quilt, all patchwork. There was a hat, there was a coat rack with a hat hanging on, a pair of shoes were still next to the bed from this man, very neatly placed. I described that whole entire part of the house. And he's like, what's the big deal? You know, and I said, come here. And he comes back in and he goes, what? I said, I haven't been there. I've been standing here. I haven't left this room.
Yeah.
And he goes, shit, babe. Said, right. And he's like, you okay? I said, I think I just pooped in my pantyhose.
Clearly, I'm not okay.
No, I said, I think I just pooped in my pantyhose. He goes, what? I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like, this guy knows everything about my mom dying. He goes, what? I said, the day she died, I did very specific things with her. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, I had to close her eyes. She died gasping for air. I had to close her lips and shut her mouth because my children were coming and they were babies. And I didn't want them to see their grandmother like that. And he's like, are you serious? I said, I didn't tell him. I don't even think you know that. Did you know that?
I don't think so.
No. It was just a very emotional day. And this guy knew everything that I did. And he was telling me, you can't run. But the point is, that was the day that my door got kicked open. Interestingly enough, the son of this man lived across the street. And he walked in, knocked on the door, almost scared the hell out of me.
Because you're sitting there talking to someone that's dead, and then someone knocks on the door, and you're like, who is that?
Yeah, it was just like, what? But so this knock at the door ended up being this man's son. So he came to the door, and we were talking to him about the house. I kind of went back into real estate mode, and I said, listen, you know, you guys are asking this amount of money for this house, but it's just not going to happen. It hasn't been updated. There were still tin cabinets from the 1950s. The countertops were worn completely down into the silverware drawers. It was a hot mess. And I was explaining this to him, and he said to me, he goes, yeah, well, my dad, you know, he lived here for like 50, 60 years, and he never wanted to leave. And like back in the 80s, me and my brothers were like, hey, Pop, let us help you fix the house up and make some adjustments and maybe update it, get new cabinets, new countertops. No, I'm not having it. I just like it the way it is. It's my favorite pile of rocks. I'm not changing anything. And when that came off his lips, my husband looked at me, he goes, and I'm like, and I was just like,
I know that already.
Yeah, but like even all those things that he said about my mom and the things that I did and showed me around the house, all those things all of a sudden just tunneled right in, and it was just like my favorite pile of rocks. And I had said that to my husband, and this man had said it to me, and like, you know, I always tell people, spirit doesn't care if you believe or not. That's not what the point is, and that's not their job. Nor is it mine or hers as a medium to prove to people that what we're doing really works or that it's really true. Spirit does that. They pull up things, and you know that, and they mention things, and you know that all of a sudden makes sense to the sitter, to the person who's sitting with us.
Yeah, it's not supposed to make sense to us because it's not for us, it's for those people, and that's why we're here. We're not here for us or anyone else. We're here for those people.
Yeah,
So
I
wait,
just wanted to explain that.
Did you find the...
She's getting to it.
Oh.
Yes. So I said to this guy, I said, listen, I said, this is the coolest house. I said, I love this house. I love old houses. But there's like little footprints somewhere. What's with footprints? He goes, oh, my dad used to whittle and carve things when he was bored in his spare time. And so when I was born, because we were all raised in this house, he put footprints. We had to lay a new floor or ground or whatever in front of this fireplace. And so that he dug it up and hammered it all out and put new pieces down, but he whittled out my footprints. I said, where? He said, over here. And in the floor of this hearth, of this huge fireplace, were this boy, Stephen, his son's footprints, backwards, pinky toe to pinky toe, because he thought that was kind of funny. And then as we were walking down to the basement, I saw all of the hash marks on the doorway down to the basement of all the children over the years. I said, your dad put these all here? He said, yeah. So it all just kind of came together. I mean, that's the short story of it all.
I bet he brought his son over too.
Oh, he did. Yeah, he brought him over
felt
to
bad,
help
probably
solidify what he was telling me.
Yeah, because he scared you because you needed it, but then he kind of felt bad. So to validate everything physically, he brought his son over to make sense to you.
Is that why he was talking to you?
Yes.
To open your door?
To open up my door and make me believe.
Interesting.
So I know from that experience that spirit does their job in helping you believe. I had a reading years ago with a woman who wanted to speak with her father. She came in, I was giving a reading somewhere, and the reading that we ended up having with her dad was very emotional. They were very close. They were very connected. And we were sitting there, and the whole time we were sitting there, there was a penguin. And I just told you this the other day. I don't think you've heard that before, have you? No. And we're in there, and I mean, like a big penguin, like big, wah, 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 and it's walking around, and it's waggling its arms, and bark, 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 and it's squawking at this girl who's across the table from me the whole time. And it was very difficult to give this reading because it was so emotional. She was so close to her father, and he died relatively young, and she was only in her early 30s.
You randomly just bring up, there's a penguin here.
But I'm like, I can't tell her there's a penguin in the room that has nothing to do with the damn reading. I'm like, what the heck? I asked this penguin, please go away, you're distracting me. And it was
no, tell her I'm here.
It was such a difficult reading. I'm like, oh my God. And this was like, I said, big. This was like over 100 pounds. I'm like, do penguins even come that big? I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's
like an
walk, walk,
emperor
walk,
penguin.
walk, walk, walk. And it's looking her walk, 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 and it's running around the other side of the chair, and it's looking at me like, what the hell? Pay attention. And I'm just like, go away. And it just kept going on. This went on for 45 minutes. She was scheduled with an hour reading for me. I thought I was going to lose my mind. Towards the end, it was terrible. And I'm trying to stay focused, and there's this damn penguin in the room. And I'm not going to say that. Like, who the hell says, oh, by the way, while she's sitting here sobbing over her father in the reading that I'm giving her, there was this giant penguin in the room. Does that make any sense to you? Because I'm thinking she's not going to pay me. She's going to think I'm off my rocker. How does this even happen? And why? It was just the weirdest, most uncomfortable reading. Top 5 most uncomfortable reading ever. So like 15 minutes before we were done, it was kind of wrapping up, and I knew she still had more time. I said, do you have any other questions for me? And at that point, she's like, no, I just was like, that was a great reading. Thank you so much. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I gotta talk about this penguin. I said, listen, I just want to let you know. I said, I've got a list of like 15 people I'm supposed to read. You're like my third person. And this is probably for somebody else, more than likely. But I just thought I was going to mention it to you, and just bear with me. I'm not sure why this is here. I'm thinking, do I do this? Do I not do
I
it?
want to get paid.
How do I segue into a penguin?
Big emotional
A giant penguin
conversation.
squawking around you like for the last 45 minutes. Did her father come back as a penguin? I was thinking,
you can't say
then
that.
like all kinds of weird stuff is going through my head because it was just so weird. I'm like, oh my God. I said, listen, do you have anything to do with penguins? So she's like, what? And I'm like, good job, Jules. She just totally threw that one out. Penguins. You're asking this woman about penguins. She goes, like, yeah? And I'm like, I'm trying to keep a straight face. I'm like, you do? She's like, why would you ask me that? And I'm like,
now I have to tell her there's a penguin in this room.
So I said, okay, here's the deal.
At least it wasn't an elephant.
Right? Oh, God.
Wow.
I said, the whole time I've been reading you, there's been this giant penguin running around your chair, squawking at you, flapping its arms, waddling all over the place, but being super loud, super obnoxious. And she's like, oh, I don't know, his name was like Mr. Wiggles or Edward, or it was like a weird name. And she just, without anything, she just, all of a sudden, tears were just streaming down her face. She goes, my dad was a marine biologist and we lived in Australia for like 8 years, and he rescued this penguin and it was hurt in some sort of situation. I don't remember. She goes, I was only like 8 years old, and he rehabilitated this penguin, but he brought it home to do it. And it ended up staying at home. We could never really let it go, and it was a king emperor penguin. He was huge. She goes, oh my God, I miss him so much. And she's sobbing and crying about this penguin and how much she loves this penguin. I'm like, what? A penguin? I just sat here for 45 minutes being tortured by a king emperor penguin, thinking that I was crazy. So listen.
But you had a penguin in your house.
And she said she said most of my friends had dogs and cats. A couple of them had roos in Australia. We had this penguin. Like, who has a penguin?
God, I want that to be my life.
Right?
I want to become a marine biologist and bring me
I wanted to be a marine biologist, but then I was like,
do.
being a marine biologist wouldn't work for me because I'm so white and I'll be on a boat in the middle of the ocean
You
all
would
day
get
and I'll have
cancer.
skin cancer by the time I'm 20.
How did we just? So I mean, how does that happen? And like I said, I even question it. So sometimes people question. I don't know about you because you're just getting going, but people question me about things that I say, and I'm just like, I question things. I questioned the penguin over a reading with her father, but sure enough, and the point is, I should have said something earlier, and I didn't. I don't regret it, but I feel like I should have, but everything works out the way it's supposed to. The penguin came in at the last end, and maybe that's a good thing because that gave us more time to talk with her dad and have a really great reading, and it was a really great reading.
Was he hanging out with the penguin?
The penguin was hanging out with him. I mean, yeah, they're both dead, so.
It's so cute.
both dead.
If you guys enjoyed this story, make sure to check out our other videos in this series of Paranormal Stories of a Medium. We will post our playlist here for you on our end screen. However, make sure you guys subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you get notified the next time we post. And while you guys wait for our next video, check out these videos next. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye.
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 Just doubt things too, because physically our ego gets in the way, and especially for me right now, and this business is helping me to get past that, is dealing with what I do doesn't have to make sense. It just is there, and I
You are the
can't.
messenger, though. You have to understand that you are the deliverer. You are the medium. You're the message sender, the message giver. You can't question. You have to take your ego out of it, and it's really hard to do that because you want to know that you're helping somebody. You want to know that you're giving them the answers that they so desperately are searching for. But at the end of the day, you can only give them what they need, not what they want, because we still have to go through what this thing called life. And we still have to deal with the ups and downs and the good, the bad, the happy, the sad.